as goes Pennsylvania, will go this race. Since 2000, a Democrat has won the presidential election every time, except, of course, Donald Trump in 2016, and that was by less than 1% of the vote total.
A new poll that came out today shows that Trump and Harris are tied in Pennsylvania.
All you timeless children with your predictions and flashbacks, trying to get ahead. What makes you think I can see you? What makes you think I believe you? Dreams, like my bed. Have you heard this lately? News that I'm wailing, shot, that's from the past. All the dreams were flying, all the thoughts were dying. Heard, it's coming fast.
The quiet period of the summer is almost over.
It's over. It's over. And when I first of all, we haven't been together in a while, so it's good to be back with you. I was thinking about where we left off in the last time we did this segment. I think we're on track with how we called it. We essentially agreed that there was going to be a likely bounce for Harris following the DNC convention. And I think we saw that. We saw that materially. But I was looking at some data today that Nate Silver put together. You know, Nate left, of course, 538, and he now is the proprietor of the Silver Bulletin on Substack. But he had some interesting data that came out where he basically said that today was Kamala Harris's worst day in a matter of weeks. And what he's referring to, of course, is since her nomination, the kind of surge she's had, you know, great media and good polls out there as well. But he noted a couple things today. And one of them is that while Harris sits ahead by 3.8% in the national poll tracker that they have, and that's up 2.3% from the day before the Democratic convention. So the bounce that you and I suggested would likely occur did indeed occur. However, we also said that that would be the fact to sell, perhaps, and that there'd be a regression back towards a tighter race. And I think we're starting to see early indications of that today. In Nate Silver's model, according to Nate Silver today, she's fallen to a 47.3% chance of winning the Electoral College versus 52.4% for Donald Trump. And that's a reversal from where she was only about a week or two ago, where she was leading in the Electoral College as well as the popular vote. It's an interesting turn of events over just the last couple of days.
It certainly is. And I don't think that anyone finds the bounce in polling surprising. In fact, the Trump campaign in recent days has put out a memo letting everyone know that you're going to see a Harris bounce materialize, and that shouldn't be unexpected because that's typically what occurs around this time of the year. When we turn our attention to betting markets and our favorite website, predicted.org, we take a look at where the presidential odds have shifted here in recent sessions. Right now, Kamala down 1 cent today from 55 to 54 cents. Trump still in at 48. We've started to see maybe a little bit of narrowing here in recent sessions. There was a pretty wide gap in the middle of August when Harris was trading at 59 cents and Trump was at 43. And now that spread is down just to 7 cents itself.
Yeah.
This is probably going to be a pretty cllose race for the next few weeks, and we should only expect it to tighten up,
I think
at least
right.
in the near term.
I think you're right, Chris. In fact, I have a thesis that I'll share with you and our listeners. And I think, and it's not a particularly novel one, but it's one I'd be able to take all comers in terms of bets on. And that thesis is simply, as goes Pennsylvania, will go this race. I think it really comes down to that. And I think crunching into the numbers, I was looking really closely at Pennsylvania because it's such an interesting state, right? It's been predominantly Democratic. In fact, looking historically, let's see, since 2000, a Democrat has won the presidential election every time, except, of course, Donald Trump in 2016, and that was by less than 1% of the vote total. And I think Pennsylvania at this point, when I was looking through the electoral numbers, I don't see really any path to victory for someone who doesn't take Pennsylvania. Mathematically, those paths do occur. They exist. There is a way to win the Electoral College at this point, considering that there's only really 8 swing states in play without winning Pennsylvania. But the odds are materially lower on each one of those. So I thought taking a closer look at Pennsylvania is in order. And I might start by asking this question. In light of Harris has not had any strong polling numbers in Pennsylvania for several weeks now. And the last thing we've seen, which you just brought up on screen, is the Emerson College poll from about a week ago that shows a dead heat in Pennsylvania. I think that's where this race is going to be fought.
A new poll that came out today shows that Trump and Harris are tied in Pennsylvania. It's on the heels of a poll that came out yesterday from Fox News, which showed Harris ahead by 1. There clearly has been a narrowing in this gap. Back in early July, on July 10th, the differential between Trump and Biden was north of 4 points. Trump was 48.8%. Biden was 43.5%, so a 5.3% spread in the polling. That has since narrowed, right? The average polling shows Trump at 47.6 and Harris at 47.5. Well, Pennsylvania is obviously very important, right? But I think it goes just to show when you look at the electoral maps, the shifts in the Sun Belt itself between Arizona, when you're taking a look at what's happening, really Georgia as well, and some of the deep South, even North Carolina. If Harris is able to win Pennsylvania, as you point out, the pathways to getting to 270 electoral votes become myriad. If she doesn't win it, then the pathways close off very, very quickly. So we call Pennsylvania the Keystone State, Jeff.
That's right.
In this election, that's never truer than before.
That's right. So, looking at the numbers, 8 years ago this week, Clinton led Pennsylvania by more than 9 points. 8 years ago in that election. 4 years ago, Biden led by nearly 6 points. Now, of course, Clinton lost by less than a point and Biden won by more than a point. But the point of that look back is in both cases, Democrats had a very wide margin, 6 and 9 points, but the race came down to within a point. So Pennsylvania has a way of getting narrower. Of the 59 public polls that were released in 2016, in that presidential race, Trump led only in 2. And in 2020, Trump led only in 5 of the 84 polls. This cycle, Trump has already led in 13 of the 17 polls in Pennsylvania. It implies a trend here and a narrowing trend toward November that really does favor Pennsylvania. My question to you would be, do you think in light of this that Harris might be reconsidering her decision about Josh Shapiro and foregoing him as a candidate?
The more I learn about the situation, the more it seems to me that Shapiro didn't want to be on the ticket himself. He liked being part of the conversation, being consideration, but he didn't want to necessarily take his name out of the hat for 2028 or 2032, which if he was VP and then lost, the brutal reality of the Democratic Party is that they eat their own. They don't really give people another shot to run again.
That's true.
I would point to a very particular area in Pennsylvania that people should watch out for if we want to really zoom in on the polling. And it's the county where I went to college, in fact, in Northampton County, Pennsylvania. This county, in all but 3 elections since 1920, has sided with the ultimate winner of the presidential election. And I would put an asterisk next to that because it's really 2. This is not a commentary on Gore Bush, but Northampton County went for Gore, and Gore won the popular vote. So only twice before in U.S. history, going back to 1920, has Northampton County voted for the loser of the popular vote. This is a county that went for Trump in 2016. It went for Biden in 2020.
What's the is that a rural county or an urban county?
I would call it like a little bit of both. There are a bunch of colleges in the area: Lehigh, Lafayette, Muhlenberg. There's Allentown, and Easton, which are both moderate-sized cities. They're both more or less directly in between Philadelphia and New York. It's about an hour and a half each way from New York and Philly to Easton. So you have a lot of commuters. You have a lot of commercial transit through the area. It's certainly blue collar. Right. Well, Biden represented an interesting shift in that area because he was that Scranton Joe. He wore that proudly. Right. And that's something that Clinton nor Harris can really gin up in the population. Lifelong Democratic voters who feel compelled or at least loyal to one of their own. Now he's not on the ticket. And that poses a unique problem that obviously we didn't see in 2020.
And when you look at the historical data that I just cited, Clinton losing by less than a point, Biden winning by a point, it looks like that Scranton Joe factor made a difference in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a really interesting state because 75% of the citizens of Pennsylvania are minorities, or they're predominantly non-Hispanic white, with Black or African American population at 12.2%. But 75% of the population is non-Hispanic white. It's a very interesting kind of case study for what to look for. And that's why the discussion of the black male vote right now is such an important thing. And you're going to see a lot more not a lot more doubling down on that vote in terms of the efforts from both camps, both Harris and Trump.
When we take a look at the overall betting odds right now for this market, not for nothing, I still think it's somewhat funny that we see odds listed for Haley, DeSantis, and Biden. I suppose the question I have for you here is because we saw his name taken off the board a few days ago in RFK. Do you feel like RFK's exclusion from the race moving forward and his endorsement of Trump represents anything that people should be paying attention to as it pertains to betting market odds?
It's a great question. I believe, and having looked at this earlier today in preparation for this discussion, is that RFK's endorsement of Trump is having more effect in Pennsylvania than in the other Rust Belt states. I think it's made a difference, perhaps in Pennsylvania, because he was polling pretty well in Pennsylvania. He was slightly over 6%, still, single digits, of course. But I think his endorsement of Trump might be one of the factors in Pennsylvania. And again, I'm sorry to be so Pennsylvania focused, but I really feel as though we're at the point where this becomes the tipping point, the Keystone state. I think that name is properly earned. So short answer, yes. I think RFK is perhaps one of the factors that's causing a recent narrowing in the polls in Pennsylvania. I also pulled up Trafalgar's polling, and Trafalgar struggles to be a tier one poll, but
yes, they do.
It was they were so prescient in the 2016 election, and they were an outlier that everybody took notice of. The owner of Trafalgar, and he does have an interesting premise. And I looked at his polling today on Pennsylvania, and he has Trump in front in Pennsylvania by 2 points, but at the same time, he has a Republican bias in his polling that continues to appear. Worked in 2016, didn't work so well in 2020. So right. I think we're going to continue to be kind of focused on this state. I think right now the blackmail voter is really where the game is being played. If Trump can win 10, 11, or 12% of that vote, keep in mind that Barack Obama had 99% of their vote. But if Trump can win 10, 11, or 12% of that vote, that spells a loss for Kamala Harris. Those are the trenches where this race is going to be fought going forward.
One thing that has changed in the races across the board, as we've seen the polling unfold in the post-Biden era, has been more or less the effect of down ballot races moving greater in favor of Democrats. Mm-hmm. We can see it here, for example, in the U.S. Senate election odds for Arizona, where back in the middle of July, the spread was 61 cents Democrat, 44 cents Republican. That has now since widened out, particularly in the wake of Biden dropping out on July 21st. That has now widened out to 77 cents Democrat, 26 cents Republican. And that's being seen across the board right now. One of the more interesting places to look that we really haven't paid much attention to in recent weeks, because quite frankly, there's not enough information and it's before Labor Day, has been on the distribution of betting market odds around the actual electoral vote outcomes. And we go down here to the lower panel and look at the 90-day chart, and we add in the equivalent GOP by 35 to 65, Dems by 35 to 65, and then Dems 65 to 104, GOP 65 to 104. We can see here right now that while the odds are down from where we were cumulatively, ultimately the market is favoring Democrats. The likely scenario right now, the base case scenario for the betting market, is for Democrats to take back or hold on to the presidency. It's interesting that I almost slipped up there and said take back the presidency.
Right. Yes, I
because
agree.
It feels like there's been a big shift, and this is intentional but also subconscious that I said that. It feels like in 2016, the election for Clinton was, do you want a third term of Obama? Very much like the George H.W. Bush election in 1988 was, do we want a third term of Reagan? And in 1988, the country said, yeah, we would love a third term of Ronald Reagan. There's been prosperity, there's been reductions in crime, and inflation's down, interest rates are down, we're beating the Soviet Union, right? The Cold War is coming to an end. So third term sounds good. In 2016, there was a lot of strife, there was a lot of division, the recovery from the global financial crisis was uneven, and so a third term of Obama, particularly with Clinton as the lead, wasn't necessarily seen as attractive. In 2020, we go to, do we want 4 more years of Trump? Trump early on was defining this race as a referendum on Biden himself. Do we want to do 4 more years of this, of the high inflation, of the cultural divide? I will fix this. Kamala, it feels like, has been able to brand this race as not of, do we want to see another 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration? She's made it a referendum again on Trump. We won't go back. We're going into the future. Is this perhaps the most important shift in this race? You know, we talk about when a new candidate comes in, they have only a few weeks to define themselves. Is the race now defined around the axis of, do we want to go back to Donald Trump as opposed to 4 more years of Kamala, which in turn makes it easier for Democrats to try to hold on to the Electoral College?
That is absolutely her edge. When it was Biden versus Trump, it was a referendum on Biden and less about Trump because Biden was the incumbent. Somehow, Harris has managed to disassociate herself as being an incumbent or part of the administration. And that's been a tremendous tactical coup and a distinct advantage for her. When this is a referendum on Trump, obviously it doesn't look that well for him. And that seems to be now, of course, tonight's going to be very important. There's going to be, I don't know how she managed to be dark 5 weeks after the switch, but that ends tonight with her first televised interview alongside Tim Walz on ABC with Dana Bash. And this will invariably, even though she's in a friendly forum, I think things will continue to get tighter. It's a friendly venue on ABC, just like Fox would be a friendly venue for Trump, if that's where the debate was. But the forum itself doesn't appear to favor Harris that much. Maybe she'll surprise, but her reputation isn't being fast on her feet, in terms of responding to questions. It might also speak to why she's been dark for the last 5 weeks. That all ends tonight, and I think next time we're talking about this race, it might have a very different picture because her policies are going to become more into focus as a result of this evening and opening herself up to the press, which is inevitable and essential going forward.
There's this really interesting dynamic playing out where you look at Americans' approval of and faith in the press, and that continues to fall over time, left and right, doesn't matter what party you ascribe to. Democrats still obviously have more faith in mainstream media than Republicans do, or independents, for what it's worth. And yet there's this strong desire by the media to kind of say, hey, look, we're important. Candidates need to come to us and talk to us so we can tell the American people what's going on, even though the American people don't believe anything we say anymore. Listen, if you look back in history, typically when like Clinton brings on Gore, or Bush brings on Cheney, or Obama brings on Biden, it's only a handful of days between when that announcement is made and when those two sit down together for an interview. Why? Because at that point in time, the presidential candidate is well known and they've already done their sit down. They've already talked to the press because they've been doing the primary process for a number of months. And so having an nth interview isn't really a big deal. So obviously her appearing for the first time without having talked to the press by herself in a substantive manner seems ahistoric. Her doing a first interview 3 weeks after she's named her running mate seems ahistoric. But then again, Jeff, this whole situation is ahistoric.
It is.
When was the last time that we had a presidential candidate drop out this late in the cycle? This has really never been done before historically, which is why, again, when we say we only typically pay attention to politics after Labor Day, this year has obviously been different. And so all the rules are, more or less, we got to tear them up. Yep. The betting markets have been more active than they were in previous years and previous cycles. We've certainly seen the financial market impact, at least from my point of view, through bonds. Absolutely. There's been a bigger impact this summer than there has been in previous years running into election cycles. So is it odd? Should we expect to hear more from our presidential candidates? Yes. Does the calendar cater to this being a unique set of circumstances? For sure. I don't think anyone could deny that. Quite frankly, Jeff, if you drop me into the shoes of the Democratic presidential nominee or the Republican nominee, and I had just 3 months to get together a campaign, my first priority would not be speaking to the press. My first priority would be making sure I have campaign staff and messaging and marketing and a website and all these other little things that you need to actually have a functional campaign before I sat down, because I'm reminded of an old axiom that one of my old bosses told me. It's like, you see all these people up on financial TV, that may look good for them, but in reality, you have clients calling and saying, hey, if you're on TV, how are you making sure that my money's taken care of? Why are you on all these press tours? You should be focusing on the job. Get off the television, put down the phone, get back to your spreadsheet. So there's both ways to it. I see it as problematic. I also see it as not problematic, but today is a defining moment in either direction. We're going to hear from both Harris and Walz tonight. Just a quick correction there. It's on CNN, not ABC, for this evening. If you want to watch that, just ABC may be showing like Dancing with the Stars or something. And I don't think we're going to see Harris and Walz on that yet, although Tim Walz does seem like the kind of guy who might do that in another lifetime after serving in office or losing the election. In terms of going into next week and what to expect moving forward, I think we should be thinking about addressing how we view the convexity of some of these markets. In the past, we've talked about how the VP selection for Democrats would be like trading a 0D or a weekly option in the S&P 500, whereas if you were trading the presidential election, it's more of a longer dated 45, 90 days, more of a leap kind of option. You don't face theta decay. Time on your side is very important there. But as we move closer to the election, these odds are going to start to move around quicker. What's been a 1 or 2 cent move per day starts to become a 3, 4, 5 cent move per day as we approach November 5th. Not saying that's going to happen next week, but generally speaking, traders should begin to anticipate that the velocity of these moves in either direction will start to increase as we get more certainty about how, or at least more confidence in how the election results will ultimately turn out. So Jeff, you've eyed Pennsylvania as the important thing to watch in the days ahead. If there's any other storyline that you want to keep your eye on between now and next Thursday when we reconvene with a special guest, which we'll announce ahead of time, who or what will you be watching?
Well, clearly this evening, like I said, it's an important night because you're going to see more policy be revealed by Harris this evening, and things have been a little bit light on policy, and it's been a great strategy. The idea of to make it about Trump, you just take away his issues. So, no taxes on tips. Yep, I like that idea. I'll do that too. Or build a wall. Sure, yeah, maybe we will build a wall. And if you continue to take away Trump's defining issues, then invariably it's just about Trump if there's no distinct policy differentiations. But that's not going to last forever. And I think policy differentiations will begin to emerge this evening. I'll continue to watch Pennsylvania because 10 out of the last 12 presidents won Pennsylvania. And I don't see how in this election cycle you'll be president without it. And then, of course, finally, the last event, the most important event, and the one that will move the needle the most will be the debate on, is that September 10th? Is that right?
Yes, sir.
September 10th. So those would be the events in front of us that are going to be the most tradable events. In terms of actionable ideas, I did play as we discussed. I looked to see the spread tighten post the DNC bounce. I played the DNC bounce for 3 to 4 cents to the upside, and now looking for a regression of about 3 to 4 cents as the rates tightens up, and that's played out perfectly so far. And I am playing in terms of the tranches in the Electoral College. I'm playing the short end in favor of Trump, as it looks as though Harris is still ahead, following Nate Silver's model. Popular vote in favor of Harris, the Electoral House starting to get narrower and starting to work a little bit more towards Trump. Those low ends, by the low end of the tranche, I'm talking about, what the GOP 1 to 4, 5 to 14, 15 to 34. Those are the areas that I'm interested in right now.
I think that's the best value on the board as well right now.
And that's where the value is by far, because you can buy the entire tranche of 3. You can go from 1 to 64 if you wish, and only pay 25 cents and still have a 4-to-1 payout. So that's by far where I see electoral or expected value. And what I mean by that is you can take the GOP by 1 to 64 electoral votes, looking at what you have in the screen in front of you. Those 4 brackets invest about a quarter for a $1 payout with a 4-to-1 payout. So that seems to be the best play. That's how I'm playing it right now.
There is a scenario in which Harris loses Pennsylvania and wins the Electoral College 270 to 268. This, to me, is the most undervalued portion of the curve right now in terms of the distributions. If this race is going to shape up the way the polls are suggesting it will, Democrats are going to win somewhere between 5 and 14, or Republicans are going to win somewhere between 5 and 14. You could buy a tight race right now for 19 cents.
Right.
You talk about the GOP odds here for being 26.
Yep.
Absolutely in the same mindset as you right now.
I agree with you completely. Adding in those 2 Dem brackets of 0 to 14 and put out, 30 cents for a 3-to-1 plus return makes all the sense in the world.